Hey everyone, let's jump right into today's explainer. Today, we're breaking down a truly fascinating sermon by Pastor Kim In-soo on Acts chapter 14. And this one is tailored specifically for you, the next generation of Korean Protestant youth living right here in Spain. Now, we know navigating a society that is so heavily dominated by Catholic culture while trying to hold on to what you learn at your Korean Sunday school, well, it can honestly feel a bit confusing sometimes. So, this explainer is going to unpack how Pastor Kim's sermon can actually help you objectively evaluate this cultural landscape around you and, more importantly, find deep, unshakable assurance in your Protestant faith. Picture this. You're sitting in religion class at your Catholic school, and you've probably wondered at some point if the grand, elaborate traditions you see all around you actually match what you read in your own Bible. Honestly, it's totally normal to feel a bit of conflict when your everyday environment in Spain feels so vastly different from your Korean home church. So let's look at how the sermon uses the historical text of Acts to really examine this tension. All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, Spain, a giant museum. Pastor Kim actually describes modern Spain as this magnificent, sprawling, real-life Catholic museum. It's like every single town has its very own patron saint, celebrated with these massive cultural events. Take the San Isidro Festival, for example. It's a huge traditional event honoring Madrid's patron saint, filled with incredible dresses, music, and literal citywide celebrations. It's everywhere. And, it doesn't stop there. Think about Semana Santa or Holy Week. The entire country basically grinds to a halt for these grand, visually spectacular religious processions. But the sermon poses a really critical question for us to think about. Have these spectacular churches and events turned into mere tourist attractions? Has the faith just become a comfortable cultural habit rather than a genuine, life-changing relationship with God? Moving right along to Section 2, humans turned into gods. To really wrap our heads around this cultural environment, the sermon draws a brilliant contrast with an event from the Apostle Paul's life. According to Acts 14, when Paul and Barnabas miraculously healed a crippled man in the city of Lystra, the locals were so completely astounded that they actually tried to worship them as gods. But the apostles didn't accept it. They literally tore their clothes in absolute distress, boldly stating they were only human beings with the exact same limitations as anyone else in the crowd. Now, this is where the sermon draws a fascinating parallel between that ancient event and the modern traditions we see today. Just as the people of Lystra mistook Paul for the Greek god Hermes, today we see the intense veneration of modern human relics, like the jewel-encrusted finger of Saint Teresa of Avila. The sermon makes such a great point here. If the Apostle Paul saw historical figures and saints being venerated this way today, even having national holidays dedicated to them, he would tear his clothes all over again, just like he did in Lystra, because humans are never, ever meant to be objects of worship. Which brings us to Section 3, the hidden history of Marian worship. So let's apply that exact same biblical logic to the veneration of the Virgin Mary, something you probably hear about all the time at school. We're going to investigate a little history here. The claims that Mary was born without sin or physically ascended into heaven actually don't come from the official Bible. No way. They trace back to a 2nd century text called the Gospel of James. The early church completely rejected this book as a fake because these miraculous claims were nowhere to be found in the official canonical Gospels. Think about it. If Mary had a miraculous, sinless birth, surely Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John would have jotted that down, right? Check out this timeline. It is actually wild to see how this belief evolved through centuries of debate. Get this, even the legendary 13th century theologian Thomas Aquinas, literally one of the most famous Catholic thinkers in history, actually opposed Marian worship because it completely lacked biblical backing. The dogma of Mary's Assumption wasn't officially adopted by the Pope until 1950. 1950! That is incredibly recent, and it perfectly illustrates exactly why the Protestant Church relies solely on the Bible rather than adding extra biblical doctrines. Let's look at Section 4 now. Is it fear or culture? So, if these traditions aren't actually rooted in the early Bible, why do they completely dominate Spanish society today? Well, the source highlights two really fascinating drivers for this modern cultural phenomenon. First, on a personal level, there's a lingering religious anxiety about purgatory. And second, on a national scale, there is a massive economic reliance on these grand events as cultural tourism. Just look at the numbers, because the economic aspect is huge. Spain relies on tourism for about 15% of its overall GDP. To put that into perspective, that is almost double the rate of France and 5 times the rate of your family's homeland in Korea.
So these religious festivals are absolutely essential economic engines for Spain. They've transitioned from purely matters of faith into necessary cultural events that literally keep the country's economy running.
But there's a deeper theological layer here too. The sermon contrasts the resulting mindsets. The Catholic tradition, with its heavy focus on purgatory, can easily create a religion of fear, where believers are constantly worried about their unconfessed sins. But against this, Pastor Kim highlights the Protestant gospel of assurance. As you learn every week in Sunday school, your salvation is completely, 100% secured by Jesus Christ's grace on the cross. You don't need the extra help of saints or continuous repetitive rituals to earn your way into heaven. It is already finished.
And finally, Section 5, Disciples with Assured Faith.
So what does this all mean for you? How does this build your confidence as a young believer living in Spain? Well, when the Apostle Paul preached to Greeks in Lystra who didn't know the Bible at all, he used nature and common sense to point them directly to the Creator. This is a theological concept known as general revelation. Like Romans 1:20 tells us, God's invisible qualities are clearly seen in what he has made. Therefore, Pastor Kim suggests that when you look around Spain, when you feel that amazing warm sunshine on your face, or you see the beautiful, abundant orchards that supply the world's olive oil, you shouldn't just see a tourist destination. These are direct, everyday reminders of your Creator's incredible love and providence for you. The sermon encourages you to recognize God's handiwork right where he placed you, in this very specific culture and beautiful environment. Which leaves us with one really big, provocative question to think about today. You aren't here in Spain just to be a spectator consuming cultural events. You hold the gospel of assurance. So how will you live out your fully assured, joyful faith as a Korean Protestant youth in your Spanish classrooms and with your friends this week? You are perfectly equipped to navigate this society knowing exactly what is biblical truth and what is just cultural tradition. Be bold, stay curious, and rest securely in the absolute assurance of your faith.